So today we're here with Devin, the VP of Brand at Greenlight. So Devin, you're the VP of Brand. So what do you do, and what is interesting about Greenlight?
Ooh, good question to start. I take care of Brand at Greenlight, which means our brand strategy, the way our brand is brought to the world, including our creative studio. I also take care of PR and how we share our story with the media. And education, so how we teach kids about money, which is the mission of Greenlight, to help parents raise financially smart kids. So our brand is all about how can we promote financial literacy and make that accessible for families in particular through their different life stages as their needs change.
Very cool. And could you tell us a little bit about how you got into this role, how you found yourself in the role of VP of Brand?
Sure. So my background is mostly marketing at high growth companies. Really was excited about an opportunity to join at a mission driven company. So this kind of opportunity at Greenlight came up. I started as director of content strategy, really leading, how are we going to bring our story to the world in the form of text? And then very quickly realized you can't do that before you build a brand, and you can't build a brand before you understand who your consumer is. So kind of started Greenlight in its early phases on this journey of becoming a well-known brand for families. And, every day we got a little bit closer to, mass market awareness, and the needs of the business grew. So the scope of the brand team has definitely grown over time as a result of our efforts to become that, loved and trusted name for families.
That's awesome. So you talked a little bit about your background. Was there a moment in your life where you realized I wanted to build brands and work in high growth tech? And if so, what was it?
Yeah, I have a really funny career history. I started out in grant writing and, graduated right in the middle of the recession in, the late 2000s-ish, and kind of pivoted my career. I'm going to date myself, but I started at the beginning of, social media marketing at Ogilvy, which is, one of the biggest, oldest advertising firms on the planet. So had the privilege of really starting in advertising at a place with a really well-established way of thinking about brands and discovering what brand stories can be and how to bring that into market. So I feel, again, super honored that I was able to start and learn in an agency environment where I could kind of dip my toe into many different disciplines. But of course, I found my real love in social media, which has just evolved. I think a lot of people started their careers in PR and social and really expanded from there. But I, jumped from agency to the startup high growth life because there are tons of similarities between that fast-paced agency life and wearing many hats and what you have to do when you roll up your sleeves and try to prove product market fit and beyond at early stage companies. So I think it was really early on at Ogilvy when I saw kind of the power that conversations can have on moving consumers to do something, whether that's, donate to a cause or book a hotel room or whatever. And really found my love at these, high growth companies where you can take on a lot and learn really quickly. I think if I had to go to kind of to a larger, more established brand, I'd want to be moving at the speed of light and taking my virtual machete and chopping down red tape. Because I think, brand, while you may be establishing something that's meant to be in market for years, you really need to learn quickly what resonates and what stories are going to capture interest. And that, today is really fluid. So that was a really long-winded way to say agency life kind of brought me to growth and brought me to brand. And those worlds kind of connecting now in a more modern way as business is moving faster than ever.
Mm.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear your background. And you had a couple things I wanted to ask you about. First, what appealed to you about joining a mission-driven company? And what were you? Maybe another way of asking that is how do you separate? And anyone can put a mission statement up on their site, right? How did you feel out and sense for yourself that there was a real commitment to that to the extent that they could actually be described as mission driven?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I mean, I've worked places where the mission statement might be more cosmetic than one would hope. And at Greenlight, again, we're on a mission to help parents raise financially smart kids. And we do that through a suite of services that families use together. But really, I think when companies make decisions on where to place resources and gauge those decisions by the impact they can have on the mission, that's really how you can kind of see through a company and understand, are they really doing what they say they're going to do? And it was really obvious to me at Greenlight when I joined that they were making steps every day that would not only help them establish that product market fit and like dig their heels in so no one else can come for it, while staying true to what people need. And I also saw Greenlight make choices that maybe were for the better of the customer or impact a really small subset of customers that were just the right thing to do. So I think we really walk the walk and talk the talk, which was really important to me. And I live in Atlanta. This is pre-pandemic that I found this opportunity. This is actually the first Atlanta-based company I've ever worked at. So I, took a position in Miami, moved back to Atlanta for some family reasons, and was kind of looking around. And I feel I keep using the word privilege, that a role like this, a company like this, existed in Atlanta that I felt had a really strong mission, was taking step towards it every day, and I think was innovating on what was, previously a quite dormant industry, in a special way. So it was many stars aligning when this opportunity was right here in my hometown, doing things that, are putting Atlanta on the map every day with a mission that I can feel really, really good about. I think we all have our stories of financial literacy and how, I wish I knew then what I know now. That really resonated with me, especially since we make some of the most important decisions on our finances, like right when we're 18, choosing our careers and choosing our first set of loans that we're going to take out, our first credit cards when we study abroad or for emergencies or whatever. And looking back on 18-year-old Devin, I was like naive and like not the smartest human on the planet. So it's a very risky moment in your life that I felt, we need to do right by those people. Windy way of saying, I think mission matters, especially mission that like you can get behind personally.
Yeah, that's great. And something's working, because that's definitely where I went when I wanted to get a card for my daughter. So good job. As you're talking about building this brand and some of the early days there, where you said you went from like through this series of recognizing like, we're starting to try to write about it, but we don't have these key building blocks put in place. Where did you go for inspiration, and like how do you bring inspiration from even, or especially, other industries or life experiences into building the brand?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, the first thing I do is I listen, and I think it's a benefit that I am not part of the target market for Greenlight, as in like, no, I'm not a tween or teenager, and I'm a recent parent. Have a 12-month-old. So not a parent of a school age child yet, which gives you the benefit of looking at things with a little less bias. So when approaching the Greenlight Challenge, for example, I really appreciate primary research, talking to people directly, understanding, especially for Greenlight as a challenger brand going against kind of established banks. Banks may not be the source of inspiration that are going to help our business's trajectory. So I also looked at proxy brands that are really truly loved and admired within the set of buyers that we consider important to us. Looked a lot in at brands like Pixar, which are beloved by the children or the teens, but co-signed by the parent. How did they establish the trust with the parent, but the adoration of the young person. So looking at brands, for me in particular, trying that have to balance these generational differences, were things that I like to look at for inspiration. But I'm also like a brand junkie and love looking at, young, new brands that I think are pushing the boundary in terms of what brands can do and say. Lots of Tushy, the bidet company, looked at Billy, the razor company, brands that I think are really pushing, what we considered, one-to-one conversations with brands in the past. So that's part of where I looked. And then another thing I find quite interesting is I developed the brand for Greenlight. And here recently, I've been doing a lot to ensure that Greenlight's brand can also speak to teens who are inherently at odds with their parents culturally, which is a challenge that every family knows well. But like seeing them in, non-creepy ways, observing fashion trends, observing how self-expression happens, observing how the pandemic and school from home impacted these young people, looking at Pew Research studies about where they place their time and learning that young people are today less likely to have like a part-time job than they were in the past because of how challenging it is to get into college and how that becomes kind of a full-time job for these young people with their extracurriculars and tutoring sessions. So to kind of take a little bit of an ethnographic approach to this as I understand, what's influencing the people that I care about the most at Greenlight, and what brands are really pushing what brands can do and how we can communicate to our cohorts.
Cool. I love that so much of your inspiration. I mean, you mentioned some cool brands out there, but I love that you're looking to the audience primarily for that inspiration and what will be most relevant and resonate with people. I'm curious, outside of that, market research or interviews, what else you talked about coming into this at the kind of early days of social media, which was definitely a fun time. That was right when we started our company. And I remember like those social bookmarking widgets that had like 150 different sites you could save your article to or whatever. Kind of being the beginning of that. But it's kind of fun, and everyone trying to figure out how to define ROI for that stuff. But whether it's in social media and your kind of early entrance into this world of tech brands, or elsewhere, what do you like to just kind of get your hands dirty with still?
Oh, as in like the part of the work I still like to dig into? Yeah,
like what do you like getting into the weeds on?
Well, when you work at a startup, or a high growth company, you're in the weeds a lot. And that's part of what I love about it. Everyone on my team, even at, the director level is involved in the work, and we all take on projects to keep our skills fresh. So our creative director will also take on some web design tasks. I will take on copywriting tasks. I did a lot of copywriting at agency days, and that's, a skill I love to keep warm. I also really love briefs. Like that's the nerd coming out in me. I established, the practice here at Greenlight, taking care of brand for all of our partners to, write cohesive, strong briefs. And now, that we create brand-led projects, they all have to start with a brief. So I appreciate the stretching the muscle of thinking about the why and pressure testing that. It's a lot of holding yourself accountable as a brief writer to pressure test. I think it's even more for the writer than the receiver. Why are we doing this? Who are we speaking to? What are the hypotheses we're trying to test? So that's a place I like to get really involved. And when you work at a high growth company where you've got lots of things to do, there's always the balance of how robust should that brief be? How prescriptive should we be on this project? Is this a place where we can really explore different routes, or are you just looking for something to get done really quickly? So I really like finding, working in that gray space of figuring out what's the best way to kick off a project and keep people inspired to do work, but also to get it done quickly at the right level of rigor that needs to be done for the project. So those are two places I play in a lot these days, but also really into we've been doing teen trend reports. So again, that wonderful opportunity that we don't belong to that target market, trying to look objectively at what's happening, and I love contributing to that with what I've seen. And here lately, I recently noticed that, hey, we tried to age our brand up to make it a little, appeal a little bit more for teens. And looking at pop culture, I realized, wow, we were really a year or two ahead of where trends would be in terms of the design risk that we were taking in our brand, and kind of recognizing where that is. So I also love contributing to trying to cast trends out as it relates to brands, especially working with young people and teens, because things move so fast. A lot of our language that we've developed comes from tweens, tween girls in particular, not at Greenlight, but culturally. So I really love kind of studying that generation and seeing the influence they have on like mass market culture, which is wild and fast.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple times there that you're not part of the target demo. What's a pro and what's a con of that?
Well, obviously I'm not a teen anymore. I think it's an incredible pro in general. Removing yourself and stripping your bias off is something that I will spend my entire life managing my bias. So, we have these lived experiences that change how we think about things every day. And when you don't belong to that cohort, for example, when you're studying 16, 17-year-olds, I think it's a huge advantage being able to look with a fresh set of eyes and ask questions in ways that maybe people haven't asked before. Although, I do see sometimes maybe you can arrive at a solution faster if you're marketing to people like you. But is it the best solution? Is it the strongest story? I talk a lot about bias in work. I think as marketers, we really need to be talking about it really, really often because of the influence that we have on society in general. I could talk about this all day. And we have to be made aware of it, but it's so much easier to be made aware of it when it's very clearly, visibly different from who you are. Yeah. So I think it's a true, I like to coach my teams to think about it like that as well. I think it leads to kind of more, you uncover stones, like you find things you may not have found before because you ask questions that you may not have asked.
Does that force a bit more testing, like to actually
totally
know if it's resonant? How do you go about testing what's working and not working?
Oh my gosh, we are really surgical at Greenlight, intensely surgical when we test things. And on our team, we test everything from email subject lines to TV commercial concepts. So testing at multiple levels of fidelity happen and each part of the creative process and even during the branding process. Right now, Greenlight is exploring what is it going to mean for us to serve young people older the age of 18, which is who we call young adults. So how can we, get in front of them with creative concepts, brand lines, names, to kind of get feedback. So varying levels of fidelity depending on if something's in market or still in the conceptual phase. And we've done it, all kinds of ways from looking at testing statistical significance levels on a tagline on our website to right now we're really into online focus groups where we can get both quant and qual results from large groups of people through online settings. But every project kind of goes about it a little bit differently. And I think it's just incredibly important because it leads to more effective work. But also hopefully gets you to high performing work faster, which, every dollar counts when you're working at a high growth company, typically, especially now. So it's also a way to kind of, your insurance policy, right? Trying to go into calculated bets with the most information you can.
Wow, that's awesome. And when you think about kind of the core story of this brand, and we know storytelling gets used a lot in marketing. I used to just absolutely hate the term, just because I always thought of like people sitting around a campfire, but then I think I've warmed up to it because I like telling stories and hearing stories. But for the marketing purposes and for your brand, how would you define what it is and also what storytelling is not?
It's funny that you think about storytelling as a little kumbaya around a fire. I get that. From a business perspective, I think a story is the way in which you present your brand and connect it to the people it should matter to. The storytelling discipline probably takes many, many forms, depending on who you're speaking to, what you need to say to them, what's going to resonate, and where you're having that conversation. But I think at its core, it's what am I supposed to mean? What is my brand supposed to mean to the people I want to care about it? What it's not is probably a list of features and functions. The value monetarily of the service that someone's buying. Hopefully storytelling helps strengthen a brand's message by making it both like practical and emotional to the buyer. And I think we're at a place now more than ever where the practical part of the story is just as important as the emotional part of the story. Both as information is like incredibly available to people, but also because of the, economic environment that we're in that is pervasively impacting consumers. And I think people are getting like more and more discerning every day. So really important that the stories we tell, are rock solid, they're believable, they're backed up, that our brand story isn't so lofty that it's not supported by the product it's meant to sell. So I have worked places before where the story and the brand has been, light years ahead of the product it was meant, the product manifestation of it. And now I subscribe to the school of thought that those things really need to live on the same level and be partners and have parity with each other. So I think that, stories that are so lofty and abstract that don't connect to real value, that's what storytelling is not today. I think those are great ways maybe to entertain, but not always to market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your initial response there, I was taking notes as you were talking. I wrote down stories, how you share your brand to the people that it should matter to. I think that's like the best and most succinct answer I've ever heard on what story is in the context of marketing. So, well done. It's a hard thing to explain. I feel like most people, when you ask them this question, not just in the context of this podcast, but in the context of just broader marketing conversations, it's a thing that people kind of tell a story to explain. And sometimes it's not as clear as that. So I thought that was really great. Digging into Greenlight a little bit more specifically, how would you explain the brand story at your company?
Yeah, well, Greenlight's all about, it's the mission. It's helping parents raise financially smart kids. And the way that is reflected in the story that we tell is through, enabling, families to learn together. Whether that's through, the brand values that are reflected in our work every day, which are, trust, quality, and for families. Trust, making sure that we're building, a brand promise that parents can get behind because we're helping them take care of two things that matter the most: their money and their kids. Probably in reverse order, their kids and then their money. Quality.
Depends on who you ask, right?
Well, yeah. And then quality. So, this is something reliable that you can, feel comfortable, comparing against traditional banking institutions that have been around for 100 years and for families. So, built in a way that wasn't just for parents, it wasn't just for kids, it wasn't just for adults, but was for a family and a connected family to use together, which I think is really, really special. And finding ways to, help parents raise financially smart kids means teaching their kids directly, which means talking with them directly, which we don't take lightly, the permission that gives us. But also making sure parents are equipped to teach their kids things that they may not understand well themselves. So you'll see woven throughout our brand and products, a tone that feels really accessible and welcoming and warm, and creative that feels optimistic and bright and, accessible in a way that is infectious. And then you'll also see, content delivered at, a fifth or sixth grade level, which everyone can consume and enjoy, which we kind of stole from our director of education is a career journalist who kind of shared with us some of the secrets of journalism and how, even most popular publications are writing in a fifth and sixth grade level to ensure that accessibility. So yeah, the story in itself, promoting family financial literacy, family togetherness, family money management, I think is manifested through how the brand is presented every day. And then like the tactical examples you see in our financial literacy game, Level Up, which is meant to be, fun for all generations, to a blog post talking about the differences between, credit and debit, or why inflation matters for your daily budget now, to our TikToks where we, dance with kids about trade-off decisions. Hopefully it's been, woven throughout with a thread that feels consistent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And one of the things that us marketers always talk about is differentiation, right? And not just being able to differentiate, but to do that in a sustainable and defensible way. So what does that mean for you all?
Well, I think differentiation starts by taking actions that no one else can. And making sure that like your position, the position you're trying to have is backed up by actions you've taken. Otherwise, we are, again, a really discerning group of people, humans are, so that, can fall really flat. So I think that differentiation starts with something unique and special that can be presented in a way that the people who are meant to enjoy it will enjoy it. And hopefully you've created many, many ways for that to happen, both in the products that you're selling, but also the way that the brand's presented. And at Greenlight, we have, a really funny competitive set. Like before Greenlight, parents maybe were paying allowance in cash, and kids may be spending without, having the opportunity to think about trade-off decisions. So, we battle the ATM as a competitor. We battle established financial institutions as competitors. We battle other fintechs who are up and coming and trying to serve this specific need, which is families. But I think, differentiation starts with the product itself. And then, you build a brand that celebrates those differences. And hopefully you've done it in a way where you've understood the market and you've understood the customer and what they need better than anyone else, and delivered solutions to them that they didn't even know they need. Like I laugh at the old saying that if you would have, before cars, if you would have asked somebody what they needed, they would say a faster horse. Yep. Well, before Greenlight, I think if you asked a parent what they needed, they would say more ATMs on every corner. When in reality, we needed something more than that, which was a way, for your kids to learn how to manage money well, and a way for you to stay connected with them in a way that you can, trust that they're making good decisions.
Yeah. More ATMs or more money jars, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. My wife tells me that story all the time about when she was a little girl. Her mom would have the jars for one to save, one to spend, one to give. And she, we have 3 children, and she mentioned wanting to do that for our eldest. And I said, no, we'll just do Greenlight.
Yeah.
Made a lot more sense. So we got the oldest of cards. So looking forward to getting that set up. Yeah. So you mentioned Tushy and Billy's Razors as a couple of brands that you think are just doing great stuff. Who else do you see out there in just the broader brand world building just really amazing brands that you feel a pull towards?
Well, I was actually really inspired during the holiday season. I was kind of brought back to Etsy, and having seen Etsy's kind of trajectory and evolution of brand over time, I think it's really powerful how they have continue to modernize their brand, but celebrate the creators who make it. I love brands that have this distributed ownership with the people who are part of the brand. I think those are super, super special just positions in the world. So seeing how, Etsy with their holiday campaign in particular was able to tell this like emotional, modern premium story through the lens of like everyday makers, I thought that was really special. And I just think that the way that they've evolved, like their brand identity has been like really beautiful. But another brand that reminds me of that is Peloton, where you've got this brand that is shared with all of its instructors. And I'm a, big Peloton fan, so a lot of bias in this in particular. But really think that they have a huge opportunity in front of them that I'm not sure they fully capitalized on, which is igniting communities around personalities. I think do a wonderful job of casting, and I don't even know if you call it casting, hiring their instructors. And, they've got a very diverse set of instructors who teach lots of different things. And they have workouts for people with different physical abilities and, workouts for people who are postpartum, for example. So I think they've done a really great job of diversifying their offering to reach all kinds of athletes. And I think that there's a huge opportunity to tell that through the lens of the diverse instructors that they've brought on to kind of humanize their platform. And I think that, brands like, Etsy have take a page from a similar playbook. And I dream about the days, Greenlight's been around since 2017. I dream about the days where we can tell the story through the lens of the kids, through the kids who've graduated and who've made really solid financial choices. And, as those kids become parents themselves, how maybe they're setting up their child's 529 plan, in their first year of life, because they've learned what good financial management means. So I, dream about the days where I can share the brand ownership with the people who live it, kind of with these really established case studies, which I think you see through Etsy and you see through Peloton.
And where should Peloton send you a check if they use this idea?
Well, you know what? I'll just take, just comp my subscription. No big deal. And I think they've started it, to be fair. Like any piece of creative you see, even with their like apparel lines, the models are the instructors. They've done a good job of placing the models, as talent in their work. But I think they can do so much more because the community there is really, I think, cultivated by the teachers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those brands where they happen to make bikes and the exercises in the community revolve around the bikes, but if the bikes went away, they'd still have a really strong brand and community.
That's right.
So it's really, really special. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier when we were talking about storytelling about the shift from or balancing of practical with emotional, especially with some, at least economic uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think this period or climate of people just kind of waiting to see, like, are things going to turn around? Are things going to get worse? What do you think that means for brand marketers?
Yeah, well, I actually think that this need for parity in storytelling between practical and emotional, I think this started a while ago. And I, on reflecting, I think a lot of this started with Trump's presidency and his candidacy leading up to it. And, discussion around validity of media stories, we all became more discerning humans. So I think this, idea of proof points has become just so pervasive in our society. But I really think it can kind of be attributed to this moment culturally where, there was a lot more skepticism and criticism on both sides, not to take this into a political place, but I think people began to be more critical in general. And, fast forward to today, you see everyone being impacted by the economy, by interest rates, you see credit cards being taken out at different rates, but you also see unemployment at like fabulous lows. And I, from a brand perspective, I think it's, important that we respect how discerning our buyers are. I feel like I've said that word way, way too frequently here in my talk with y'all. But I think we need to, respect their intelligence and understand that we now have new norms when we're communicating to people. Look back at the advertising from the David Ogilvy era and look at today. Look at the information we have at hand today. Look at what convinces people to make buying decisions today. And I think we need to make sure that when we tell our stories, one of our ad agencies just reminded me of this week, that we don't just say the what and the why, but we share the how. So, Greenlight helps you raise financially smart kids. Well, how do we do that? Let me show you practically. Because if I don't show you practically, I'm not going to earn your trust. And your trust is even, more difficult now to earn than it ever has been before because we're more discerning people. So I think it just kind of shines a light on being able to pay off all of the commitments, the promises that you're making, showing that in your stories that you tell.
Yeah, I like that emphasis on the how. I think it is, everyone was talking about know your why and everything a couple years ago. Yeah. And you said something really interesting earlier about these lofty stories that are disconnected from what you do. And I think that how piece is usually your bridge.
That's right.
So I like how you're thinking about that with that economic climate. And I don't want to belabor this too much, but what do you think people are reluctant to do right now with brand? Like, is there like that maybe is easy in a period of relatively easier fundraising and revenue growth? Oh,
sure. I mean, the reliance on paid media is just a huge discussion that we have had at Greenlight. And I know many of my, comrades in brand marketing continue to have. It's many of us really benefited from, the media environment post-pandemic when a lot of established advertisers pulled out, record low advertising, rates. A lot of us truly benefited. And now we're probably coming back to more normal phase, but compounded with the economic environment and probably overcorrection of the economic environment. I think many companies are trying to reassess their reliance on paid media, and how, at what rate they're happy to grow, given the rising cost of media, given, difficulty to track, given Apple's privacy updates last year. Mm-hmm. So that in addition to, is it the right time to take risks? Thinking about, we do lots of testing at Greenlight, like we talked about. We do lots of thinking about, is this an environment in which we'll get reliable results we can take into the future with this thing that we've tried? So is it the right time to be taking risk and trying new things? For example, Greenlight went on an experiential marketing tour last fall. Not only was it kind of a funny idea to start in some cold climates in the fall. But, thinking about, are these consumer habits that we're seeing the norm moving forward? Or are we learning things now that maybe will apply in a better economic environment when consumers, are spending things in a more regular capacity?
And what do you think is an underrated approach that not enough people are putting serious effort into?
I mean, that's a really good question. All brands I'm sure that you're talking to are trying lots of things, or they should be. So we talk about fail fast with product. How do you fail fast with marketing? Is something that, I've been, trying to coach my team to think about. As brand people, we like precision. We like perfection. The whole idea of divine discontent is the work ever finished. And one thing I think that might be underrated, or maybe is, causes us a ton of discomfort, is trying lots of things that may not be perfect to see what works. And I'll be honest, sometimes we put things in market that I'm like, oh no, but then I realize it's a limited test, small group of people. If it succeeds, we'll learn and continue. For example, we're trying things like new channels, things like influencers, what types of influencers will work for Greenlight. We're testing things like young people influencers, teen influencers. I think brands to survive and find new ways to grow that maybe aren't dependent on the same traditional paid media channels, what might be underrated is trying lots and lots of different things, even if they're not perfectly precise. It's a huge... Joining Greenlight, working with the leadership that I've worked for and teaching them what brand is and what marketing is, we've all gotten out of our comfort zones to find that balance of not everything needs to be 100%. And it's really hard, I think, for makers and designers and writers who pride themselves on their work, to put in, to put forth work that isn't 100%, but it's this constant balance of how much energy is right to give right now. Which I think is a modern way of thinking about it. But it's still, you're untangling years and years and years of perfection demanded by, art directors and ECDs across the world. So it's a wild way of thinking about content and marketing.
Yeah. I like how you're thinking about that. And that fear of failure can be really intense and like paralyzing sometimes. And I was wondering how you think about the role. You mentioned developing the brand strategy. Yeah. When you're testing in a lot of different areas and trying a lot of different things and learning and so forth, how important or how often do you go back and reflect those things you're learning in the documented strategy?
Infrequently. Brand takes, perception and preference takes years to develop. So while we're talking about, quick pace tests to learn, what channels might work or what stories might work, I still subscribe to the thought that it takes, years to earn somebody's trust and preference and adoration as a brand. So hopefully infrequently we're tweaking that. Since I developed our brand strategy, brand map is what we call it, with our values and our beliefs, our personality, our visual attributes. Since I did that in 2020, we've revisited once. And when we revisited, it was in an effort to future-proof our brand. We established product market fit. We had this super strong foothold, and parents, and awareness with parents across the United States. But as we, chase down future ambitions to potentially engage our young adult population and work to serve the needs of teens in particular, we saw the need to readdress the brand to make sure it could reflect what was going to motivate those people. So after understanding what teens needed, trying to cast some trends for how banking will evolve and how, cultural influential factors for this current generation of young people, how that will affect their preferences. We made some updates to our brand, which are reflected in our visual attributes, so how our brand presents itself, but also in our brand values. So we talked about trust, quality, and for families. We've recently added the value of made for tomorrow to our brand, which gives us permission to take a little bit more futuristic of an approach to the brand identity, but also is meant to serve as this kind of dual message of both, we evolve with you as you grow. What you need as an 18-year-old is very different than what you needed when you were 12. And it's very rare for any product to stay with you from your young adult or your tween teenage years into young adult years. But also, how can we anticipate what culturally you'll need to understand? So, talk about crypto, talk about, how we are a tap to pay society now, talk about new security measures put into payments. How can we be one step ahead of all these trends, so that, we are demonstrating to you that we are growing with you, both in your individual journey, but as our cultural journey, as a society. And luckily in fintech, we have lots of cultures we can look to as examples. European markets and Asian markets are far further advanced in fintech than we are. And they also have like really different cultural dynamics with their family. So kind of taking a look at how other cultures think about money and payments and those kinds of things. So to answer your question, infrequently, but when the business demands, or when you look and you say it's not working, I haven't established that product market fit, what's wrong, is a good opportunity to go back and listen again. And I imagine that Greenlight might revisit more frequently than others because of our cyclical audience and how fast things change when you're talking about, the next generation, but still fairly infrequently.
That's helpful.
Yeah, you mentioned crypto. I wanted to ask about what type of move into Web3/crypto could make sense for you all at Greenlight. Have you all been thinking about what's next in that part of the world, part of the internet?
Yeah, I mean, not enough. I think that, Web3 brings opportunities for, decentralized finance, which we obviously would need to kind of handhold our customers into, new norms that are developed in finance as a huge part of that future change. But I think we're kind of like in a will this catch on approach. My last role, I actually worked at an augmented reality company, and maybe was a place where our marketing and our branding was pretty far ahead of the promises we were looking to deliver in the product. And we're also a quite loved, trusted brand at Greenlight. So I think any move that we make towards the future in that way needs to be very solid. Something that we hope. We also are talking to the most time poor people on the planet. You're talking about parents. Yeah. So how can we, hold their hand through this and help them learn what they need to learn in this new economy? But that also means what's worth learning, what's going to be here to stay, what should you spend your time investing in or thinking about, parent, as you juggle your carpool and your Instacart and all
you'd be like,
things.
hey kids, now it's time for you to learn the lesson about speculative gambling on a pump and dump scam coin.
Sure.
Maybe that's not quite on brand, right?
Sure. I mean, is it the right choice? It's so funny. We do offer investing for families at Greenlight, and with kids, they get to research stocks and propose trades to their parents. And it's funny. Like, we launched the week after, game stonks with GameStop, and nice. To see the first set of investors in the first 2 weeks, that was the top 3 most popular stock that was traded among these kids. Luckily, they're trading like $20 at a time, often way less than that. So they can kind of learn, and like, I'd rather learn and fail with $20 than $20,000. So it's like this balance of like, if they're going to fail, if they're going to trip up and fall, you want them to do it early and soon so they can live through that experience. It's so much more impactful when you experience it than when you read it. So it's this like kind of funny balance of like, how much freedom do you want to give? How risky will you allow them to get?
I really like that set. I picked up on a little bit of that with the savings account. You can let your child, or you can decide, I think the parent decides to turn it on, but if they can transfer money out of savings into their spending account. But I really liked that. And I actually enabled it because I was like, okay, you're saving. I really don't want you to deplete your savings, but my daughter's 12. It's like, okay, you can learn from it. If you
that's right, transfer
that out and spend it, then you're not going to have anything in savings. It's like a good life lesson.
Right. And like, I've also been thinking a lot about, as a new parent, it's like, as your parent or as your child grows, why is it at the age of 18 that a switch changes and suddenly they're an adult? Like, our whole job as parents is to slowly allow them to earn more responsibility. So maybe she's, earning $15 a week now, buying her, nice to haves, her fun money, but how can you over time give her more responsibility? So maybe next year she owns her back to school budget and has to make it all work. Or, helping her save for her school trip, like slowly giving more more responsibility. I also heard, before they start driving, before they, have them get out the car and go get the takeout from the restaurant to demonstrate that they're capable of doing that. Find these small steps along the way. And that's what Greenlight's looking to enable, because every child develops differently.
That's great. Devin, it's been a pleasure having you on. And if people want to learn more about you or follow you, where's the best place to find you online?
Sure. Well, find Greenlight at greenlight.com and find me on LinkedIn. My name is Devin Zimmerman, and I'd love to connect about all things brand, obviously, and families, family finance. Any tricks for a new mom? I'm also doors open.